Good morning, everyone, and thanks for waking up with me on Up with India. Today, I'll be joined by the creator of the Say Their Names Memorial, a memorial that was created to highlight victims of police brutality, systemic racism, and injustice. A Portland designer, Joy Proctor, is joining me on the show today to talk about how that memorial has impacted the world. It's now featured in over 25 places across the nation. In her personal work, she's been highlighted as Harper's Bazaar's top designer, but now she adds another notch to her belt of titles, and I'm very happy to have her on the show. Welcoming her to Delaware, Joy Proctor. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, India. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Very welcome. I'm happy to have you here because, like I said, Joy, you have inspired so many people across the nation where they are now trying to replicate not even trying, but they're succeeding at it, right?
Yeah.
They're replicating this idea, what started off as an idea and you were able to manifest into reality. Let's take people back a little bit.
Okay.
And so where did this idea even come from? Because your work is in editorial design and so how did you even end up doing something like this?
That's such a good question. So, to be honest with you, this started, it started as a result of a couple things. So when the pandemic happened, there were a bunch of flower growers who had nothing to do with their flowers. They had these orders that they were supposed to put into weddings. And I had one particular grower here in Portland who makes these just incredible roses that are very high end, very gorgeous. And she told me, Joy, I've got nothing to do with these flowers. Is there a project you want to work on? And so I was like, I had been protesting and I had been thinking about how I could bring my work in and what I could add personally to this movement. And I had worried a little bit about momentum, right? I was so happy to see in Portland, we showed up every day. Every day there were multiple protests here. But I was so worried that the movement would slow down as time went on. And so I thought, if I create a memorial that's on the protest line, maybe people will see it and remember it's not only about the names that you know and that you're repeating, it's about the people you don't remember. And there are far too many of them. So I thought, when she said that, I thought, what if I got those flowers and I turned this into this beautiful display that highlights the tragedy of why we're out there every night. And so that's basically how it started. It was kind of like this happenstance just about what happened with the pandemic and what was happening with the social justice movement here. And it culminated in the very first memorial we did in Portland. Like I said, my plan was that we would put it up on the protest line, but the particular day we weren't able to do that. And so instead, we put it up on a fence that lined the location where people protested from. And this was not just for protests. It's a place where anybody who wanted to be part of the movement could go, and they knew at any time of the day they'd find a like-minded soul to be able to talk to do things with. And so we decided to put the first one there. And when we did that, going backwards just a little bit, knowing we wanted to do this memorial, it was like, where do you find the people? Where do you find these names?
And that was my question. One of my questions was, did you have to reach out to the families of these individuals, and how did they receive that when you were trying to get these photos and things together?
That's a really good question. Well, I'll be completely honest with you. In the beginning, we didn't reach out to families. In the beginning, we naively assumed that we could Google and there would be a database and there would be a list of names and that we could find pictures, because we wanted people not only to see the names, but see the photographs of these people. And there was no database like that. And so we spent a week plus trying to get this ready for Juneteenth, which is when we wanted to put it up. We spent a week plus researching, and I took, I think 50 names. My sister took 50 names. I had friends who took 50. I think I took civil rights leaders. Other folks took women. Other people took children under the age of 18. And so we spent a lot of time putting this database together because it didn't exist. And that's how we started. In the beginning, I think we were maybe under 200 names. Fast forward to now, as a result of this having grown, we have names being submitted on the website, but also every city that it's gone into, local people know the local stories. And so they've continued to grow the database and the names as well. And so that's how we came up with the list of names that we have now.
So you went from designer to investigative journalist to
Yeah.
you kind of had to do it all to make this thing happen. Again, you talk about digging in the archives of just the internet, just searching,
Yeah.
and trying to find, put the pieces of this together. I really like how you started to tell the story about how you kind of got the flowers first, right? And so
Mhm.
the work that you ended up doing came through your creativity. You kind of brought activism
Yeah.
art together in this way, and was able to, again, create something that has impacted so many people. Talk to me about the reception, how people felt when they came. Was there anyone that talked to you?
Yeah.
Their thoughts. What were some of the thoughts at that moment?
That's a really good question. So that first one that we did, it was I just asked a group of friends if they would come help, and everybody, of course, was like, "Yes, I'll do it." As we started to put it up we put it up on a very busy intersection. So as we started to put it up, people were watching, and they were just looking, and I think you could see them reading every name, looking in everybody's eyes, and most people were just silenced. They saw this, and the gravity of the sheer number, the range and age, the diversity in the faces. I think most people were just taken aback. We had a few people who were like, "What is this? What is this for?" And I said very clearly, "This is a memorial to honor Black lives taken by systemic racism and racial injustice." And there were a few folks who you could tell who weren't super happy to see it, but for the most part, I think we didn't list anything. We didn't say any words. It's pretty obvious what it is, and I think that's how most people took it. I think most people were very moved by it. To be honest with you, since then, so right after we created that and we spent all this time on these pictures, I was like, why don't I, with my business Instagram, this is before we created the website and everything else, but on my business Instagram, personal, that I use personally, I said to my followers, like, why would I not share this? Like, would anybody else like to do this? I can send you the PDFs. And so we started to send them out to folks, and they had, they went through the same process. They put it up, and they had similar experiences, where most of the community was very supportive. But then there were definitely people who came out and said, "Why does this not include certain other folks? Why are you doing this? Do you have a permit?" Lots of things. So yeah, so it's for the most part, the reception has been very good. But I'll be honest with you, this is a conversation that I think our country and our communities need to have, and that's why we put it up, so that we can facilitate. After you see this, we want to spur action in folks. You go through the process of seeing it, and then you decide what you do next. Is it political action? Is it something you do in your community? Where do you go from here? And so that's really what we wanted this to be, to facilitate conversation, and our country needs to have those.
Some of the places that this memorial has popped up have been places where there have been recent acts of police brutality. And
Yeah.
Houston was one of the places that I did see the memorial pop up. I think that's how it caught my attention. And I ended up reaching out because I wanted to learn more. But considering the fact that Texas was the place where Mr. George Floyd was it at any moment important for you to have it in these certain hot spots? Maybe even the city where Breonna Taylor was killed. Was it important for you to have it in these hot spots, or did it not really matter? You just kind of wanted it to spread everywhere?
That's a really good question. Well, to be honest with you, when we started here in Portland is very different than other places. And I think we realized very quickly when we saw how it was received in other places that the country is not all the same. And there are a lot of people in southern states and other states going through things that we go through here, but on a whole different level. And so, yes, I think it's been important to us that we make sure that this memorial is in any place it can be. And so we wanted it to be grassroots. We wanted to say, we'll give anybody these images and support from afar to help them put it up where it's needed. And we found that it's very, very needed in places, you're right, like Louisville, like Dallas, like Houston, Minneapolis, all over the country, really. But yeah, it's important to us that, you know, in places that are not, where the conversations about racial injustice and systemic racism are not easy to have, it's important to us to see these up there for two reasons. We want to make sure that folks know this is an issue. And like I said, secondly, we want to facilitate this conversation and we want to start it no matter how difficult it is.
And it is a difficult conversation because unfortunately it shines a light on parts of history that I think that some people have swallowed and are not really ready to regurgitate and bring back up and talk about.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's still important to have. I don't know if you watched the presidential debate, and that there was a lot going on there. But there was a question that was asked to President Donald Trump, and it was, you know, will you denounce certain groups that have in history contributed to racial injustice? And in a way, he did and didn't all at the same time. He denounced the Proud Boys or told them to step down and step back, but he didn't really say anything about the KKK and some of these.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel watching that and knowing that you have this memorial where you're trying to facilitate these conversations and it's kind of still again being stepped on?
Yeah, I felt he skirted everything in that debate. He told the Proud Boys, who have terrorized Portland, by the way, who last weekend, as a result of the protests that we've had, which are mostly peaceful, there are people who are setting things on fire. It happens. And I think most of us agree, and many of the people protesting actively have these conversations with those folks who are being violent. Please don't do that. But the protests are mostly peaceful. So those Proud Boys that he talked about and he didn't denounce, and he said, stand down and stand by. Step back and stand by. And they took that as a call to action. It makes me furious that we have an administration now who has, even before this, not acknowledged the loss of life. He has not acknowledged the loss of life of many of the people in this memorial. He has not done anything to bring this country together and to talk about how to move forward and how to address these issues. He said last night that, you know, he of course, you know, he believes in law enforcement and he stands behind the police. And Joe Biden said, you know, the same thing, but Joe Biden acknowledged that there are bad seeds. And we have seen those bad seeds take lives on television this year and many years before. And so to hear Trump not condemn white supremacy and racism was sickening. It was sickening, and it showed us how important it is that we get out there in November and past November on the national level, the local level, to vote, you know, to make sure that we have an administration who believes that Black Lives Matter and takes care of all of its people and doesn't pander to white supremacist and racist groups.
If you were brought to the table, I mean, someone like yourself who has created something like this, I think would deserve to come to the table and talk about, you know, how to bridge the gap, bring communities together, you know, have this conversation. If you were brought to the table to discuss this with the president or with the incoming president, however which way it goes, what would be your advice moving forward as far as bringing the communities together?
That's a really good question. I wish I had a great answer to that. I don't know that I do, but I can say one of the things that we're doing with our memorial is for future memorials, we will require that anyone who puts one up goes through and facilitates a community conversation. I'm not exactly sure yet, and we're still working on how that works, who facilitates it, if there are moderators, who's brought to the table. The workings of this conversation, I don't know, but I do know that it's the responsibility of all of us, citizens, community members, neighbors, families, friends, to have this conversation with each other, because our president's not doing it. And, you know, if all goes well and we elect Biden and Harris in November and they come in January, I hope that everything that they've said, and I believe everything they've said and they promise will happen. And I hope that they not only speak to people like me and other folks in Portland and around the country who are protesting, but I hope they speak to the other side, the counter protesters, the people who stay quiet, because we're not going to move forward if we don't involve everybody in this conversation. This is a problem that's been with our country since the very beginning, the original sin, as they say, of our country. And so it's going to take every single person to be part of this. And I sincerely hope that the next administration realizes that. And that Joe Biden, like he said last night, will be a president to Democrats and Republicans. And he doesn't divide people the way that Trump and Trump's administration have.
The Say Their Names Memorial is not just a memorial, but it's also it is a grassroots initiative. For people that don't know what that means, what that is, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when we started, it was really important to me. I mean, we created this in Portland and we did the research, but it wasn't about our group. I really felt that there were so many people who wanted to be part of the movement, but they didn't know how. So some folks would take to the streets, some folks would make calls for voter registration and, on the political front. But for some people, they wanted another way to be part. And so for us, making sure that this was something that grew in the community and was put up by the community, facilitated and talked about in the community was important. So the grassroots part of this really was we help with giving the pictures. We help with the idea and with the support from afar, but really it comes from every single community. And they're working on their issues and they're having their conversations about the things that are pressing to them, about the lives that they've lost, about the experiences they've had. And that's the important thing. I think that's how we're going to heal this country that's been so divided. If every single community says, this is a problem here and we take responsibility and we're going to move forward together, that was really our hope, that any community that felt they were having this issue said, we're going to take a stand, Black Lives Matter. This is important. We're going to talk about it. We're going to show it. And then we're going to decide collectively how we move on.
Joy, I don't know as a child, when I would play outside and I fell down, scraped my knee and put a Band-Aid on it. When I got, kind of just interested in seeing if it was healing or not, I'd take the Band-Aid off, but it's still ripping that Band-Aid off, right?
Yeah.
And I give that analogy because I want to ask a question in regards to healing. You talked a little bit about that. And my question is, with everything going on, as communities are trying to conversate, understand, and heal, we're also in the midst of court cases, criminal and civil cases that are taking place. And specifically, I'm talking about the case of Breonna Taylor, which is one of the faces that is in the memorial that you have. And, when that announcement came, it hurt a lot of people. From what I read on social media, even my own personal self, I kind of felt that one a little deep. And I'm probably not supposed to say that, but it hurt me. I'm a Black woman. I have feelings. I can only relate. It hurt. And in the midst of trying to heal, getting an announcement like the one that we received from the AG in Kentucky, saying that, there is an officer that will be charged. One, will not be for the death, for killing Breonna Taylor, but it will be for wanton endangerment and shooting a wall. In the midst of people trying to heal and hope for justice, something like that comes, and it's again like that Band-Aid just being ripped off of that bruise. Talk to me about the moment that you heard that announcement, and again, just getting done with the memorial. I think in Houston, it was just getting ready to move. Talk to me about how that felt for you.
Oh, it is heavy. It is heavy. We have been fighting for justice for Breonna Taylor for a long time. And I think the truth is that decision was painful for so many of us. Because after being in the streets, after doing everything that we can with our local constituents, we didn't see the results that she deserved. And I think for a lot of us, it felt like a huge setback. And as a Black woman too, India, I felt it. It felt like we don't matter, that you could be asleep in your home and someone could come and do anything and they'd get away with it because of the color of your skin. And that's just sickening because it's 2020. And so I think the thing that I feel and that I have to remember is that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We've dealt with this problem since the beginning of this country, and we will continue to deal with it, but we have to be in it for the long haul, and we have to know that things will change. And while Breonna Taylor did not get justice, justices can be there. Lee Merritt, an attorney who represents many families in our memorial, we've been honored to have him at a number of our events. And he said right away, don't give up hope. There is still the opportunity for justice, but it involves the executive branch. And so we have to remember that all of these things are tied into voting, that Breonna Taylor still can get justice, but we need to change the administration that we have so that we can change things. And so after feeling down, I realized we have to remember that this is not going to go away overnight, and we have to be in it for the long haul. We have to do the work every single day. We have to show up in November. We have to show up every single time, not just November, but every time there's an election, because us making change is about the local level and the larger level. It's the justices. It's everyone, not just the president. So while I felt set back, I realized I feel like we are moving forward in the right way, and that this country wants the right thing to happen. This country wants justice for women like Breonna Taylor, for men like George Floyd, and for all of the rest of the names that are not spoken enough. You know, we want justice for those people. And so I feel hopeful, even though we do have setbacks, and we will continue to have setbacks. We're moving forward in the right direction.
Speaking of moving forward, Joy, what's going to happen next for the Say Their Names Memorial? You talked a little bit about working alongside Lee Merritt, an attorney, but will you work with any activists, or have you already? And is this going to grow and keep growing and getting bigger, or is there, an end to all of this, as they say, all come to an end? But let me know. Talk to me.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you asked that. I had the pleasure of being in Houston a few days ago for a memorial that we partnered with Trey the Truth on, and the mother and father of Botham Jean were there. The mother of Botham Jean, by the way, his 29th birthday would have been yesterday, and the mother of Botham Jean said, "I don't want Joy to do this anymore. Our job should be to put Joy out of business." And it's a nonprofit, it's not a business, but our job should be to stop Joy from what she's doing. And the truth is, yes, I'd love to see an end to this. But sadly, we don't have a full list of names. Our database isn't complete. And so moving forward, what our hope is to continue to make this database available for the public, since there's not one in existence, that shows people the names, the ages, the geographic locations, the circumstances regarding, around their tragic ends, but also celebrates their life. We want to have bios from conversations that we've had with family members, so that we can talk about these people and remember them, and not only talk about their end, but their life and what they gave to this world and what they would have continued to give to this world had they not been taken from us. So one of the pieces that we're working on in the future is making this database much more robust than it is now. Right now, there's a list of names and pictures, and we're starting slowly to put bios on. We have a group of volunteers working on contacting families so that we don't just take the information we find online as fact, but we speak to the families about that. And so I would say to anybody watching, if you are a family member, if you have a story, if you have looked at our website and there's a name and a story that are not there, please submit that. We need people to submit those so that we can continue that. But on the other end, with creating these memorials, our hope is that next year we will be able to do a nationwide tour. And so while we have the grassroots memorials coming up in cities, we want to do a nationwide tour that we host, so that we can facilitate these community conversations, and we can also bring to light stories that people haven't heard. At all of these memorials and at these community conversations, we'll have voter registration, because that's another component, you know? And so for us, it's about healing. It's about remembering the stories, seeing the faces, and then figuring out how to bring those folks justice and how to heal our communities, on the political level and on the community level.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joy. Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you.
On the show. Really, really appreciate you being here and sharing the work that you do. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you for watching. You can, again, watch this episode on at WITN22 Wilm. That's at WITN22 Wilm. Follow us on social media for more news, updates, and information. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning.